Hey guys, so you're listening to the Grey F podcast, or you're watching this on my YouTube channel, Hardcore Crypto. Today here I have a special guest, as always. And before we start and we get into the podcast, let me just talk a little bit about our sponsors. So this specific episode is brought to you by the DV project. DV has made it easier for a lot of people to own masternodes and manage them. For a lot of you who want to learn more about masternodes, I would recommend you go on my YouTube channel, Hardcore Crypto. I'll also put the link in the description, or you can go to the website thedvproject.org, and then you'll be able to find them and learn more about running masternodes and generating coins by becoming an active member of the community. So let's get this podcast started. So how do you introduce yourself? A lot of people are listening now. They're like, who is talking?
Okay. So I'm Connie Gallippi.
Okay. Is that Italian?
It is Italian, yeah.
Okay.
Founder of BitGive, and previously had a career in the environmental field as well. So I had a life before Bitcoin, as we all did, I'm sure. And started BitGive in 2013. So I've been at this for over 6 years now. And just learning and growing and being challenged in many ways.
So Bitcoin is 10 years old. You started BitGive in like 6 years ago.
2013, yeah.
Wow, you must be rich because of all the Bitcoins you bought.
I wish. No, I did. No, I unfortunately, my career has always been sort of modest and nonprofit focused. And so I've never, and even, back then especially, did not have the money to buy Bitcoin and see what happened. I mean, I bought a little, but considering how a lot of people that have been in that long have become millionaires or billionaires.
Okay.
No, definitely not me, unfortunately.
Right. And so, I mean, what is BitGive? Bit has sounds like it's a Bitcoin probably, and Give feels more charitable.
Exactly. Yes. So when we started, there was only Bitcoin. There were no other cryptocurrencies. Even Ethereum was not around. So it was the first official Bitcoin and blockchain nonprofit charitable organization. And we were given the federal status of nonprofit and tax exempt in 2014.
Wow.
So very early. Back then, the U.S. government and the multiple agencies that now try to govern and oversee cryptocurrency had not even issued any sort of guidance or policies or anything. So it was a big deal. It was kind of like a one of many but legitimizing kind of milestone moments in Bitcoin, because it was so early to have a federal agency in the U.S. acknowledge and register a Bitcoin nonprofit. So that was pretty exciting back then. And since then, we have expanded beyond just Bitcoin. But we've been very careful about that, because obviously there are a lot of other coins and blockchains and stuff going on in this industry that we don't really have the resources to vet them all and deal with all that. A lot of them are not necessarily legitimate, and we don't need to be getting involved in all of that. So we've been very careful. But most recently, with our donation platform, GiveTrack, we did integrate with Uphold. And so Uphold basically will take in, I think it's over 30, now they're announcing, I think 15 more. So probably soon it will be like 45 different currencies, both fiat and cryptocurrencies, that we can take in, and then they're converting it into Bitcoin and sending Bitcoin to the charities that we work with.
Okay, so that is really interesting. But then I want to find out more about how did you even, where did you see the connection between Bitcoin and charity? And what was your story to the point where you came across Bitcoin and thought that, I can actually make, combine my charity courses with this?
Yes, so it was not expected or planned in any way, which I think for a lot of people when they tell you how they learned about Bitcoin, it wasn't necessarily something they saw coming.
Yeah.
So my brother was involved even earlier than I was. He's the co-founder of BitPay.
Oh, is
so, it? Yes.
Wow.
Tony Gallippi.
Right. Okay, I didn't make that connection before.
That's my brother, yeah. And so I originally had heard about Bitcoin through him, but I was working in my former career. I was doing environmental work. I had worked my way up into a senior level for 15 years. So I was like in my own world.
Yeah.
But I was very intrigued by it, and I thought, wow, this is the future. You know, it's very exciting. And they started their company in 2011, so even, you know, more early, and so much, you know, interesting stuff coming out at that time about what the potential was for the technology. And so I was most excited about how you could access someone directly, no matter where they were, and with money. So I don't remember where I saw it or where I heard it first, but what excited me was that, you know, even back then you could send someone through SMS Bitcoin, and they could just have, you know, one of those simple feature phones. They could be in some remote place, and you could send them Bitcoin, and that just like blew my mind.
Okay, so what you said there to me is very interesting already, because I think for a lot of men, maybe I should put it that way, the way they, including myself, the way I would explain Bitcoin to someone is very different from how you're explaining it right now, because I think that's also probably where we find a problem that others don't really understand us from, you know, the angle that we take it for. So how do you actually, when you meet someone who don't understand Bitcoin, what is your narrative?
Well, it's challenging, but typically what I talk about is I start with the digital cash because it's a simple way for them to try to wrap their minds around it, and talk about, like what I just said, that you could send someone, you know, from anywhere in the world instantly. You can send money peer-to-peer, and that it's basically a digital cash, and that it's sent on a separate network outside of our traditional banking and government institutions. That is peer-to-peer, faster, cheaper, more secure. And when then I talk about what BitGive is all about, I bring in that aspect for nonprofits, right? So if they are able to move money globally, transfer, you know, cross-border, faster and cheaper and more securely, that improves effectiveness and efficiencies like tenfold, just that, you know? And so then people start to understand, because it's a real use case, right? It's not about trading or holding or all that stuff. It's what does this tech really offer? And then they start to realize, oh yeah, like wow, if especially in like the case of like a disaster relief or something like that, if you're able to move money like instantly and you don't have to pay a bunch of fees and wait like a month for it to get there, that's you're saving lives just by that alone, right? And then the accountability piece through, you know, cryptography and private keys, you know, whoever you're sending it to is the only person who can receive it.
Yes.
There's no other, you know, they're the only one that has the private key to open it, right? And then we talk about the transparency as well, the public ledger and blockchain, and that you can leverage that for accountability too, right? So a lot of people ask about, you know, how do charities spend their money? Where is it going? How do I know it went where I wanted it to go? All of those questions. And the blockchain offers a huge, you know, benefit for that. So people start, you know, at least when I talk about these aspects of it, I think they can see that, oh wow, there's actually, you know, a use case for this in the real world that offers a lot of benefits. And it's not just, you know, somebody buying a coin and waiting to see if it goes up.
Right.
You know?
Interesting. So, you know, I wonder, so you decided to probably buy your first Bitcoin and you used it a little bit, and then...
wow, yeah. Yeah, so I bought my first Bitcoin way before I started BitGive. So, I think it was probably March of 2013. It was after the Cyprus spike and then fall. That was the first time that I think like people really grasped that there was a real use case and value to it when they saw what happened in Cyprus and that it actually was being used in that situation.
Yes.
And so, it peaked, but then it fell again, and I'm like, this is my chance. So I bought right at that point. And
Right.
back then, oh my God, to buy Bitcoin at that point was a whole adventure.
I know, I can imagine.
Yeah. And my brother helped me, because I was like, okay, I really want to do this. Like, how do I do this? And it was so interesting, the whole process. It was like, go to a bank and hand them this, a piece of paper with this on it. And somehow, I don't even know, honestly, how this was, so long ago. Somehow they had made an arrangement with that bank that they would somehow turn it into Bitcoin. I have no idea how they turned it into Bitcoin, but you would essentially have two separate things going on. You would trust that you're
Right.
giving your fiat to this particular bank account that God knows who it belongs to, and then go separately to this platform that's a Bitcoin exchange and
Right.
hope that magically your Bitcoin shows up in your account.
I know what you're talking about. But you see, that's how in Africa most Bitcoin is being sold, because the platforms haven't been fully implemented yet.
Yeah.
And also the culture of business, or the way of doing business is a little different.
Yeah, it's more manual. This was very manual.
Exactly.
Physically walk into a bank, hand them a piece of paper with this account number on it, and I was
With
just
your reference on it.
I'm like, how's this gonna go? And
know.
then I went straight back to the car, and I opened my iPad at the time. I had an iPad. I don't know who uses those anymore, but and I'm like, God help me that this works, and I see Bitcoin showing up on this thing. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
But so that was before BitGive. I hadn't even thought of BitGive. It was just kind of like I was aware of what was happening because of my brother, and I was like, oh, this is my chance to get in, and buy a little. And that's honestly the only time I ever bought Bitcoin.
So, so BitGive, I wonder what were the causes that made you to, I know there's a lot of things in the world, but what exactly really pushed you that this is why I want to start BitGive? So
this was also completely unexpected. I was, working in the environmental field, and a lot of my work was with nonprofits and in California. So environmental NGOs, and for many years I was either staff at one of them or many of two at least, but mostly consulting and working on behalf of NGOs. And so I was very aware of the need. Right. They do such important work that many could argue is not necessarily appropriate, that NGOs are doing the most critical work sometimes in our communities, right? Mm-hmm. What about the government? Why isn't the government feeding people and making sure they have clean water? And, just very basic human needs are being met by nonprofits. And they have to go out and fundraise somehow to do these things, right? Mm-hmm. And so I knew about that and the challenge, because a lot of what I did before was trying to help them get more money, right? And it was in a different context. It was largely public funding sources. So I was lobbying, working for NGOs to argue the case to the state of California, to different agencies to get money into different programs and things like that. But it was the same idea that they need support. So when I came up with this idea for BitGive was, coming from that space, understanding a little bit about Bitcoin, and then I went to the very first Bitcoin conference that was all about Bitcoin. Was in May of 2013, and the only reason I went was really because my brother was there, and I never really see him because he lives on the East Coast. It's just 3,000 miles away from me. And it was an exciting time for them because they had just gotten their first seed round. So they were, they had a big presence at this Bitcoin conference. So I went.
What conference was that?
It was put on by the Bitcoin Foundation, which back then was, a big deal. It's kind of, unfortunately, had a lot of issues since then. But so they put on this conference, and it was a very early magical kind of time. And so that's where I came up with this idea of BitGive. So I was there, and I was really immersed in the energy of it. And I could see, we're in Silicon Valley, first of all. And I could see, that there were these really bright, excited entrepreneurs with their companies, kind of like stars in their eyes, There were a lot of engineers, walking around, kind of checking this whole scene out. And there were investors too, because we were in the heart of Silicon Valley. We were in San Jose.
Yeah.
And I thought, I was already blown away by the potential of what this tech could do. But when I saw that all those pieces were coming together and everyone was in one place, and I felt like this, it was a magical, I felt like a very magical time. And I don't know where it came from. I just had this idea well, you guys need, this is going to be huge, and you need like a philanthropic foundation.
Right.
You need something that's going to, take what's happening here and channel some of it into doing good and having a social impact. And I didn't know if that was already happening because I was kind of new to the space. And so I talked to actually my brother's co-founder, Stephen, about it because I was so excited that I couldn't wait for my brother. He was like off on an interview and I was like, I really need to share this idea. So I was like, Stephen, I had this idea, do you guys is somebody already doing that? And he was like, no, and that's brilliant. You have to do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. So then it just kind of snowballed from there. It was like, Tony, I told him about it and he thought it was a great idea. They helped me kind of find the right people. And we set it up totally separate from BitPay. A lot of people think it's connected to BitPay, but it's not at all. It's its own entity. But they were very helpful in the beginning because they were already plugged in and, they knew who I should talk to and that sort of thing. And it went from an idea, and I came up with the name then too. It was like, I thought of the name and I could picture like the logo, and it was really crazy actually. And it just, we went for it and made it happen. I mean, I literally started out with opening up Word and making like one of those trifold brochures from scratch just to put my ideas down and explain like what I was thinking and what the basics would be, just to show it even back to Tony and Stephen and be like, okay,
this is what it,
this is what I'm thinking, Yeah, and from that it became what it is today after 6 years.
Well done.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
And what do you really work on, and what kind of projects would you say you've been very proud of in the last 6 years?
Wow. Well, so our focus is entirely on how to leverage the tech for nonprofits. So we work directly with a lot of NGOs. And we've kind of evolved over the years how we do that, but mostly it's about, partnering with them and teaching them about the technology and why they should care and like how it would benefit them. And a lot of times it leads to them doing like a campaign because it's an easy gateway, right? Like they're like, oh, this is crazy technology, but if you can fundraise for us in it, great kind of thing. It's like an easy gateway.
So you can fundraise for them with crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so in the early days, we would do just one at a time. We were so small. I had to still work my other job at first, so I was like, no resources, and we would just one at a time really focus on it. And then over the years, we evolved into our platform that we have now that's GiveTrack, which allows us not only to scale so we can do more than one at a time, but it brings in more than just the fundraising aspects, right? It has as the donors and the NGOs really using the technology. So we've come a long way. And I think, I mean, we focus mostly on humanitarian, public health, environmental causes. Like we try to be somewhat focused. Yeah. At the same time, very broadly defining those things to not pigeonhole ourselves too much.
That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to get too broad either into like political things or, there's a lot of other kind of really controversial stuff out there.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's unfortunately, so in my heart, what I wanted to do was the most controversial stuff to help with human rights and a lot of the issues that Bitcoin could actually really help with because of how it's structured. However, as a registered nonprofit in the US, we felt like we were already doing something so controversial and so new and innovative that we had enough battles to fight, even if we kept the sectors that we worked in pretty neutral. Right.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to take on like some of the much more like politically charged issues because we were already, it's still, I mean, it's gotten better today, but in the early years, man, Bitcoin was so like controversial in and of itself.
Well, could you give an example of those areas?
Well, like things like human rights issues a lot of times are political,
Okay.
and there's a lot of problems in countries where Bitcoin would be very helpful and useful that are also the hardest to use it without getting yourself into a lot of
I see what
issues,
you mean. Now it's become the money problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but and like for example, like in Afghanistan, we have an NGO that we work with there called Code to Inspire. They're actually in the U.S., but all their work is in Afghanistan. But we can't send Bitcoin to Afghanistan
because
right?
of the sanctions.
So it's like it's a beautiful example, yet we can't really do it, And there's a lot of other kind of efforts that are going on in Bitcoin and in crypto that are not as official as we are, that maybe are trying things like that. But we're officially registered in the U.S. We can't take those chances. We would lose everything.
Yes.
The whole thing would go down. So
as an example now, if someone wants to work with you, they have a charity, how does that work? What is the process? How does the technology work?
Okay, so we have now GiveTrack, which we've invested a lot in to have a platform, and we launched the version 1 in December, so it's a more robust version than our original MVP. And basically they can put a project up. We have a process they have to go through to onboard. They have to be a registered NGO. We have to check that they're in compliance. We vet them and all that, because otherwise it comes back on us, right? But once they get through all that, they can put a project up on the platform, and it's very, standardized that how they present the projects are all kind of similar. Like you have to explain what the problem is that you're trying to solve. What is your solution for that problem? How much money are you trying to raise for this particular project or effort? And then we have it structured where they can break it down into milestones. So they can say, well, first we're gonna, do a little bit of planning. We need to hire some folks to do like maybe a ground assessment if it's a construction project of some sort, and they can break down how much that part will cost. And then they'll start, maybe preparing the site, things like that. So they can break down how they're going to use the funds instead of just saying, give us money. Even if they have a total goal, if they don't explain like what that's for and break it down, it's hard to engage donors,
So do you guys take it upon yourself to go and raise the funds? So if I say I have a project I want to do in South Africa with the kids, I have to outline, I have to give you pretty much the plan, right? And the roadmap of what we're about to do. And once it's approved, you guys go and raise money for me in Bitcoin.
I wish. It's not as easy as that. I wish we could. We do try, and we do have a lot of efforts where we're working towards that. But we also ask the NGO to partner with us in that, because they also have their own networks and audience, and oftentimes we can multiply our effect by having that, because we only have so many people that are listening to BitGive. But the more you can reach out through NGO partnerships and broader networks and audiences, the better.
Right.
But we do, we promote the projects, we do as much as we can. We have our social media networks, we have a newsletter, we have a PR team, everything we can do. But it's challenging, I gotta say. It's not the easiest thing. And I think oftentimes the NGOs feel like they're gonna put this project up and magically a bunch of crypto is gonna come to them.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's honestly something I really struggle with now that we have a platform where we have multiple projects, because it's very hard. Like they're all sort of partially funded, and I don't know, I wish that the community would step up a little more, because we're trying to offer something where, it's mutually beneficial, that cryptocurrency people can get benefit as well, not only just to feel good for giving back, but there's tax benefits to it. There's all kinds of things for offsetting capital gains, adoption, a use case, a real use case of the technology. It's like, everyone's investing in something, but speculating on it. But what is it going to be if we don't invest in real use cases and demonstrate what's possible? So I feel like we're offering all of that to the community, and we're offering something to these NGOs. But as we build out a platform that allows us to scale and do many projects at once, it's been very hard to get funding for all these different efforts. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I'm kind of in conflict about like, gosh, maybe we should have, stayed with our original model of like one at a time and really focusing on it and making sure that they get funded. And, but at 6 years old, I feel like we needed to, grow beyond that, and we needed to offer more. So I'm very proud of GiveTrack. I mean, as a nonprofit, to build a platform has been a huge challenge. A lot of legal barriers, a lot of real barriers in the world, all kinds of issues to just get a platform launched and functioning. But yeah, it's has its challenges in fundraising.
Just like any other business, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of we are talking recently about the cryptocurrency space. I wonder if you take this idea and start conversing with a lot of other people in the space. What is the reaction? What kind of reaction do you get from them?
Well, that's a good question. I think in general, people really love it. They think it's amazing. I have a lot of people. I love what you're doing. It's so important. Thank you for what you're doing. A lot of people think, they do see that it's a real use case, and they understand that the importance of that. But mostly, I think people are so focused on trading, that they don't even get it. They really just don't get it. The majority of the industry is so focused on that. There's so much investment going into just building, trading platforms.
Right.
It's just, yeah. So we get overshadowed a lot from just all of that, And then when you see like the really big mammoths in the space trying to do charity, then we're up against that. And that's been really hard too, because we've been at this for 6 years. It's our main focus. It's what we do, and we're actually a nonprofit. Right?
But have you ever been approached by any of the big sharks to say, let's work together, maybe?
Not really. I think they like to do their own thing. Mm-hmm. They want the credit.
The credit for it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very interesting space. Charity is.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's used as a token for a lot of big companies. Well, that happens in the traditional space, but then now it's happening in crypto, where everybody kind of has their own charity arm within the business.
Yes.
To just create a narrative about their business. But that's
exactly and it's really challenging. I think it's kind of similar to not at the scale at all, but to how Buffett does his thing, right? Mm-hmm. So he already has plenty of money and whatever, but he convinces other people who have a lot of money to pledge that they will give back a certain amount, right? And Bill Gates does this too. Gates funnels it into the Gates Foundation. So he's essentially saying, hey, I know you have a lot of money. You should really do your part and give back. But give it to the Gates Foundation. Don't start your own charity
foundation,
right? And it makes perfect sense. Like, Gates is already up and running. Why recreate the wheel? They already have amazing programs, staffing. Everything is established, right? But some people want their own thing. They don't want to just give their money to to Gates.
They want the credit.
They want the credit.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because you can still get a lot of credit for giving back without recreating the wheel and spending a bunch of resources doing the same thing that other people have already done, like setting up an entity, getting it staffed, getting programs, getting a brand and all of that. Why spend precious resources that could go to NGO projects on establishing again something that's already been established? Right.
I think it's less about virtue to those people. It's about signaling. They really want the world to know that they're giving money.
Yeah.
So another thing we can talk about is for a lot. I mean, I don't think we have a lot of. I host events sometimes, and I think we don't have enough women in this space.
Yeah.
Right. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. That's also probably why the narrative, the kind of the driving force of crypto is mostly towards trading and all these other things, because there's a lot of imbalance inside it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting that you're in the same space. You're not trading. You have a charitable organization.
Yeah.
And for a lot of women also, because of this popular narrative on Twitter about crypto, where everybody's talking about how much money they're making or losing, it doesn't give enough space to show itself that, oh, there's also other things that you can do other than just buying coins.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
So I don't know, how are you helping change that narrative with your organization?
Well, we're doing the best we can. I mean, we put out what we're doing all the time, but it's so, we're like this small drop in a bucket full of other messages and big sharks and the big company. All the big companies are in what you're describing, their exchanges and their trading platforms.
It's interesting that now in crypto we also have now big companies.
I'm actually just starting to kind of feel that I've gone from big fish, small pond to small fish, big pond. It's like, even though we've been around forever and we've really strong on this particular thing, we're really starting to get kind of diluted with what's going on. But as far as like women, and I think just diversity in general in the space, it was one of my first like major issues that I noticed when I switched my career from environmental work, which was, is very diverse, lots of women, plenty of women in charge, running their own companies, in power positions, the whole thing. And then I come into this space and I'm like, what is going on here? I mean, even that first conference that I went to, I think there were maybe 2 other women in the entire conference, and it was like, I remember seeing Stephanie Murphy, who's still involved in the community, doing an interview and, standing on the floor in like the exhibit space. And it was like, she was like this oasis, I was like, oh my God, there's another woman, like, and she's the same thing. Our eyes met and we were both like, wow, like another woman. So, even from that first event, I've always felt that there's significant, imbalance, but also, even though there are women in the space, their same kind of idea with our charity work, it's very overshadowed and kind of, they're not given a lot of exposure for other women to see. Oh yeah, actually there are women in this community or in this industry, and feel welcome. So one of the earliest things I did was start pushing for events. I would see their lineup and it would be all men, usually all white men. And I'm like, guys, really? So I started developing a list of women in the space, because I was meeting all of them and I knew a lot of them that were founders and CEOs and lawyers and experts and developers and you name it. And I was putting it together, and I was actually proactively emailing it to people who were doing these events and saying, hey, I noticed you could use a little more diversity in your speaker lineup.
Right.
Like, here's some information. Because it really, I was working 2 jobs, and I was up at like 2:00 in the morning doing this because it made me so mad.
Right. Oh.
I was just so, it was so infuriating. And I was like, I got to do something about this. Well, and as you can imagine, it really didn't change much. I mean, over time it did eventually, but I really put a lot into that. And I think it took, I would say, years, and many other women who also had to speak up, because of course me acting like that also backfired on me and BitGive, because people who don't agree with you or want to help you change things, appreciate that you're being outspoken and proactive about it, right?
So look, there is a narrative in the US, especially. I mean, worldwide, in the US is very prominent now about women in tech, and there's all these theories about why not when many women are involved in this space. What is your philosophy around that?
Well, so I don't subscribe to the women don't like technology story. I'm sorry. I know too many who do. And same with investing and business and finance and all of those things. So for me, it's about not welcoming them through having kind of an unfortunate culture. Not giving them exposure to invite more women in. Because if you can imagine, like if you're seeing events all the time with no women on the speaker lineup, why would you feel welcome to go if you were a woman? Or compelled or inspired or anything, right? It's like what they say about young girls, like I can't be what I can't see.
Right.
It's the same thing.
It's almost like everybody in the hood want to become a rapper because that's all they see.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
And in a new space like this, you have to feel welcomed, or like it's where you might belong or be welcomed, right? Because it's a new space. Even if it was an old space, it's a problem. But so I think that it's about honestly really deep-rooted global issues that we have as a human race.
Right. That is very true. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so discouraging because people want to solve it easily, like with my list of, here's some women to put on your speaker lineup. It's not that simple because of like the backlash that I got and the mentality of people. Some people actively fight against these kinds of things. Other people are just completely oblivious that they have this bias and they don't even know it. So they will argue with you about it or make choices or decisions without even being aware that they're not. Okay, so
I know that everyone, including myself, is probably guilty of that, on just ignorant and being unaware of certain things. What are the things that you can simply point out that most men in this space do that they don't even know it, that they're actually ignoring a certain aspect, which would be very important to the entire space?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a lot of times what I see is sort of an immediate knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, we shouldn't judge on gender or race or anything. And it's like, of course we shouldn't. However, when there's a very obvious imbalance and all you see and all you promote and all that's happening is in one category, we obviously need to make a proactive effort to change that, right? So that knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, let's not see gender, let's not see color, let's only see merit and all that is, to me, completely irrelevant. Like, there is plenty of merit, there is plenty of talent and skill that is not white male. Plenty. So, like, what is the problem, right? Obviously, it's this, like a subconscious thing almost in some cases. Right. Some people, it's not subconscious at all, but a lot of times it's a subconscious thing. They don't get it, or their U.S. Or developed country bubbles do not even, they have no clue how privileged their perspective is, how little they've seen that's different from what they think or know. There's just so much to it that it's very discouraging because it's like, what do we do about these issues? And when I think about, when I'm battling this stuff, it's mostly in the US or, those circles where there's events and stuff happening. And I think about, how angry it makes me, but then I think about how worse it is in other parts of the world, where, we have, gender and race issues in the US. But if you think about how women are being treated like in Afghanistan and Iran and, it's a whole nother ball game, right? And so that's when I realized this is not about tech. It's definitely not about Bitcoin.
It's a social problem.
It's not about tech. It's not about the US or Silicon Valley or any of these things. It's a human problem.
Right.
Big time. Yeah.
And I think it will take some time to fix that, Probably another generation or so. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So for a lot of women listening right now who want to get into, they hear about Bitcoin and blockchain, they want to get into it.
Yeah.
But I've heard women tell me that, but I'm not a developer, so I don't really know how I can even get in.
I'm not a developer.
So what do you tell them?
And a lot of the white men in this space are not developers either. You know, like this is the pushback I would get about the speakers is like, oh, well, they're not a developer. I'm like, are all the men on your program developers? Come on, guys. Like they're CEOs, founders, lawyers. Some of them are just thought leaders that are like self-created thought leaders, like on Twitter, and you've got them on your stage. Come on, like really? That's plenty for them to qualify, but yet a woman needs to be a developer. Like it doesn't even make sense.
That is actually a good point.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
You know, like why isn't there a thought leader from Twitter that's a woman on the stage?
Yeah,
right?
That's very biased.
She needs to be a developer to be on the stage. Like it's so that's the other argument I get a lot is, oh, well, they're not developing. I'm like, okay. Like majority of founders in this space aren't developers either. Like we need a diverse skill set, you know, and actually like you were saying earlier, we need different perspectives and views on these things. I mean, how do we ever build a truly functional ecosystem and community and industry if we are only focused on certain things and with certain types of people? That's never going to work, you know? So, I mean, like my background is in forestry, but I started a Bitcoin nonprofit. Like, okay, I can do it. Anyone can do it. I'm managing a dev team now. We built a product on blockchain and Bitcoin technology. I'm not a technical person, but I find the resources, I work with the people who can help me make that happen.
Yes.
Right? I have a VP of engineering, I have a product manager, and I have a dev team. They know how to do that.
Just like Jeff Bezos can probably not write any code anymore.
Exactly.
Or he never had to.
Or maybe he never did. You
he
know?
owns the biggest company in the world right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's some beauty, if you want to be like a founder or something, I think there's beauty to having domain expertise.
Of course, yeah.
But that doesn't have to be technical. Like my domain expertise is nonprofit work, right? It's not technical. And I think there's a lot of other needs in this space. Like I know brilliant women in this space who are investors, who are traders, who started their own, investment funds, who work for major investment like VC funds. There are women who are really brilliant lawyers in this space. There's all different needs, and so I think that in those categories, we could use a lot more women. There are some women that you will see popping up like in marketing roles and stuff like that. But I think the more diverse positions that we have women in, the better too, because, then we're just perpetuating the stuff. Like, I remember one person said, they didn't have the guts to say it to my face, but someone on Twitter, of course, said, oh, well, there's a reason why the first Bitcoin charity was started by a woman. And it's like, really? That's what you're going to diminish what BitGive is about too?
Wow, where was that?
It was somebody on Twitter.
Oh, of course on Twitter.
Yeah.
Of course on Twitter.
But I was just like, wow, okay, so basically you're saying that everything BitGive is and has done and has accomplished is just completely irrelevant because it was started by a woman, and of course a woman would start a charity. Like,
wow.
And so we need to and that was actually a woman who said that too.
Oh, the thing is you never know because it was Twitter.
Well, I do know.
Okay.
but I guess my point is that we can't perpetuate these, mental mentalities or
the thing is, when you get told a lie or a certain belief, even if it's against yourself, eventually you start to believe it,
Yeah, well, it's like little girls and little boys, how they talk about what they tell them when they're growing up. Or even just the t-shirts that companies make and sell in the stores are like, I'm a princess and I'm this and that if I'm a girl. And if I'm a boy, it's like, I'm going to take on the world or I'm Superman or whatever. And it's like, if we continue to perpetuate those perspectives and mentalities, especially in young people, young women and boys, we're only perpetuating these issues, I mean, of course women are capable of doing things that and man can do, and vice versa. If men want to be softer, kinder or whatever, that's a good thing.
Right.
We need that. You know, we want that as a society.
We definitely do.
You know?
I mean, South Africa now you have a lot of rape cases and a lot of, robberies and stuff, and all of it caused by men. But do you think there are any fundamental differences between men and women? Because this is, when this conversation blows up, this is where it always comes to.
Yeah, the whole biological thing and all that. I think it's just yet again another just easy answer and easy excuse that people use to just diminish it and not work on it and not address it. I mean, obviously we're two different, beings of the human race.
Yeah.
And yes, you could point to some science that says like we have leanings in different directions, but you could also point to other science that contradicts that or shows you that there's, cases that aren't that way. And I think personally that it has nothing really to do, let's say nothing, a small percentage to do with how we're physically built biologically, and way more, like 90% or more, to do with, cultural and societal and generational perspectives and patriarchal, ways of running societies and continuing to put down certain genders, certain races in, over generations, right? That's what I think the problem is. And people love to explain it away with simple answers when it's not that simple.
I think other than the physical aspect of it, the physical difference, that's the only one that I understand. I think I understand because it's, it's self-proving. But then other than that, the whole thing is just, it's narrative based. It's like you say, you can find proof for each side.
Yeah. And there are so many,
even important, even. The most important is just the things that are wrong and needs to get fixed.
Yeah, and it's like what's encouraged,
yes.
Right? Like we were talking about, with what we tell young children,
yeah.
Right? If you told a young girl constantly, like you tell young boys, that they need to be strong and they can't cry and all these other things, what do you think they're going to turn out to be, right?
Well, if you look at the girls that are born in families of fighters, they actually end up becoming fighters themselves, doing boxing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even in the simplest examples of like one girl when there's all brothers,
it's different,
she's a tomboy.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, yeah, so it's 90% or more, I think, is nurture versus nature.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you think we should title this episode? It's been great.
Oh, wow. I don't know.
And it has to be clickbait friendly so that we can get people to click.
Oh, boy. I don't know. I'm not good at that sort of thing.
What are you good at?
What am I good at? I'm good at nonprofit stuff, I guess,
If you have to highlight things that are you really good at and write them down on paper, what would you... Okay, number 1, nonprofit, get it. 4 to go.
4? Good Lord. Well, I'd like to think that I try to use my position and voice to do good. Not just with the nonprofit and charity work, but like the things that we're talking about.
Right.
Like gender imbalances and lack of diversity issues. I really try to use my voice and not be afraid of what that might mean to just speak up.
Right. 3.
To me these are all related, but I guess because there's so few women that are given exposure, I feel like I try to be a good role model in representing that there are women in leadership roles, especially in this field.
Right.
I don't know, this is hard.
2 to go, only 2 to go. What did your friends say about you that she's really great at this?
I hear a lot that I'm very genuine.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how else to be. But,
and what is then the last quality we can say? What does Twitter think you're good at?
I actually try not to do a lot on Twitter.
Right.
Because it's just not the space for what we do. We get just drowned out.
But don't you see it as a tool also to get the word out?
Oh, absolutely. But like personally, I don't engage in like, there's so much nonsense that goes on. I don't get engaged in any of it. I would say like maybe I'm a voice of reason or not even a voice of reason, but by not engaging in it, I'm making a statement.
Okay.
You know, like I'm very focused on what we're trying to accomplish, and you know what BitGive is all about is helping other people. And the more time I spend arguing about stupid shit on Twitter, the less I'm able to accomplish to help other people.
What kind of things that have you gone into on Twitter that you've had to deal with?
I used to get caught up in the gender arguments. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's so many trolls that, you know, they will their whole purpose is to suck up your time and energy, right? So once I realized that my time was so precious, I was working 2 jobs, not sleeping, not eating, not showering, getting sick, all these things, and I'm spending my time arguing with a troll.
Right.
Like, really? And so they were winning in a way because I wasn't putting my energy and time where it was productive and where I could have an impact. I was arguing with some silly troll, right?
You know, a lot of these guys that don't even have the photo on the profile. That's what pisses me off. It's like you can't even show yourself, and you out here. You see them that almost in every thread trying to attack someone. It's like, hey man, just find something to do. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and this was like years ago, so it's gotten much worse on Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, now it's like, I won't even bother. I mean,
and you know what's funny to me is that when you go to these conferences, a lot of these people are there.
Yeah.
But they don't do anything. Everybody act like everything is cool, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But they go back, you know, behind the keyboards and everybody want to act tough and criticize about things. It's embarrassing. You know? The trolling level on Twitter especially, just next level.
And most people that are doing that are not actually doing anything
of course.
useful.
Yeah.
So I remember like in the early years, Patrick Merck was my board president for 5 years. He just rolled off the board. And so he was there from the very beginning. Before we even had an entity, he was helping me find the law firm that I needed to set it up.
Yeah.
And then he became on the board. And something happened really early on, like, you know, some sort of criticisms or whatever. And I remember saying something about it because I wasn't used to that. And in my former career, it was none of this online anonymity stuff. You know, it was all, you knew who you worked with. It was done in person. You knew what your playing field was. And so when I had all this nonsense coming in, I was like, gosh, you know, this is pretty upsetting. Like, I'm working my butt off. I'm trying so hard to do something that's about good. And I'm still working another job to pay my bills. And I'm getting all this crap, you know? And Patrick said, you know what? Almost 100% of the time, the people who are criticizing and trolling and have something negative to say are the people that aren't doing anything at all.
Yeah, of course. That's always the case.
He's like, so don't even pay attention to it. He's like, you have plenty of things to be proud of that you've accomplished, and someone who's not doing anything to contribute to the space has no right to criticize. Really. I mean,
just imagine how many people on Twitter are criticizing Elon Musk. It's like, man.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You know, it's so embarrassing that the levels are just completely different. One is building things, the other is just on Twitter talking shit. It's like, doesn't even make sense.
Thank you.
For where can people find you? BitGive.
BitGiveFoundation.org is our website. We're on all the social media things, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're even on Instagram, which
nice.
I'm somewhat challenged with because I'm a Gen Xer, but you know, we're trying. And GiveTrack.org is our platform where we have projects. We have a Bahamas relief effort that we've just launched.
Oh, wow. How is that going?
It's going well. It's been slow to start though, because like we talked about this, the bigger fish in the sea are also trying to do Bahamas relief, which is awesome because we need to help the people in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for us, that means that it's diluted across a lot of different efforts. So, and what else? We have a project in Ethiopia right now that's fundraising, as well as several in Venezuela and in the Ukraine. And we have more coming too, so yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks guys for watching. Stay awesome.